Okay, I'm going to call to order the June 27 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. First item on our agenda is roll call.
Commissioner Height.
Present.
Commissioner Teta.
Here.
Commissioner Poland.
Here.
Commissioner Shernick.
Here.
Commissioner Goldberg. Here. Commissioner Flagg. Here. Commissioner Check. Here. Councilmember Rodriguez. Here.
Okay, any communications from Planning and Development Services Director Jenny Marsh?
None to start with, and it feels like the air conditioning is on, so we're golden.
Great, thank you. We have a public invited to be heard section of our agenda, so if there's anybody in the audience who'd like to come forward and speak about something that is not on tonight's agenda, we'd love to hear from you. Nobody has signed up, but I do see some people from the public if you'd like to come forward. Seeing nobody jumping up, we'll close the public invited to be heard. Going to item number 5 on the agenda, which is Mark II Chrisman Condos Conditional Use Site Plan, PZR 2018-10 with planner Ben Ortiz.
Thank you. Chairman Shernick, members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, my name is Ben Ortiz, planner. Tonight, for your consideration, we'll be looking at the Mark II Chrisman Condos Conditional Use Site Plan located 825 Chrisman Drive. The project is located on the south side of Chrisman and west of Main Street, a little less than a block. The envisioned Longmont designates this property as mixed-use corridor. Chrisman is classified as a local street on the envisioned Longmont plan. The property is currently zoned commercial, and the proposed new zoning will be mixed-use corridor. The use is currently classified multifamily dwellings with 5 or more dwelling units, and this use is regarded as a conditional use in the commercial zoning district. In the proposed new zoning district, this would be considered a permitted use by right. The property is surrounded by both residential and commercial uses. Residential condos occupy the property immediately to the west. The IBMC College is immediately to the east. Across the street to the north are the newly constructed Chrisman Apartments. And the property to the south, not noted in your communication, includes commercial offices. The project will be comprised of 2 buildings. The east building will include 6 residential units. The west building will be comprised of 2 residential units and 1 commercial office structure. All the residential units will be 3-bedroom units. Garages will be provided for each residential unit, accessible through the middle aisle between the 2 buildings. Each tenant will be expected to haul their trash to the street on trash day, and the site will be served by a private trash company. Due to the tightness of the site, partly, the applicant proposes outdoor gathering spaces on the roof with shade structures. The project does not exceed the height restrictions of 45 feet in the commercial zoning district. So for commercial developments adjacent to residential uses, a 20-foot landscape buffer is required, and they're required to be landscaped with 1 tree and 5 shrubs per 500 square feet. The applicant is proposing a 4-foot landscape buffer adjacent to a 3.5-foot walk to include 6 skyrocket junipers in the buffer. No shrubs are proposed in this buffer. If built to meet code requirements, the landscape buffer would be 23 feet long by 20 feet wide for a total of 460 square feet. Total number of trees and shrubs required if built to code would be 1 tree and 5 shrubs. The applicant is seeking a modification to the landscaping requirements based on the City of Longmont Land Development Code, modifications of infill development, redevelopment, and changes of use. The code reads as follows. The decision-making body may modify applicable scenic entryway overlay standards, mixed-use district standards, river, stream, and wetland setbacks, common open space, landscaping, off-street parking, and residential and non-residential design standards in this development code for infill development, redevelopment projects, or changes of use where the applicant demonstrates and the city determines that the modification of a standard is appropriate, desirable, or necessary and can be achieved without detriment to surrounding properties or neighborhoods. the natural environment, or the city's ability to provide services and maintain public facilities. So as justification, the applicant is offering more trees and shrubs across the site than required. For this site, a minimum of 17 trees and 70 shrubs are required. The applicant is providing 39 trees and 132 shrubs. And staff received no negative comments to this project from the adjacent neighbors. And staff does support the requested modification. So the blue arrow points to the commercial area of the landscape buffer in question. Let me just pull this up real quick. So it is this area in here. And so if the commercial space was residential, based on our current code, there would be no landscape buffer requirement adjacent to other residential. It's just something to consider. So a number of referral agencies were notified of the project. They're listed here: St. Vrain Valley School District, CenturyLink, Xcel Energy, Comcast, Parker Place Condominiums, and the Regional Transportation District. We only heard from Xcel Energy, and their response was that the developer has to complete the application process for any new gas service. So at the neighborhood meeting, there were 3 members of the public that attended. Questions ranged from pricing of the units, general layout of the proposed development, snow removal, whether pets would be allowed, and exterior materials. I don't recall hearing any negative comments associated with this project. Subsequent to mailing out notices of the development application to property owners within 1,000 feet of the subject property and then posting the property, staff received no comments from the public. So the Planning and Zoning Commission options, the Planning and Zoning Commission is the decision-making body for this application, and the choices for the commission are as follows: to approve the Mark II Chrisman Condos conditional use site plan and modification to the landscaping standard without conditions, finding that the applicable review criteria have been met as reflected in PZR 2018-10A. The second option is to approve the Mark II Chrisman Condos conditional use site plan and modifications of the landscaping standard with conditions, finding that the applicable review criteria have generally been met, but require conditions of approval to fully comply with the criteria as reflected in PZR 2018-18B. And the last would be to deny the Mark II Chrisman Condos conditional use site plan and modifications to the landscaping, finding that the applicable review criteria have not been met as reflected in PZR 2018-10C. And staff does recommend that the Planning and Zoning Commission approve the Mark II Chrisman Condos conditional use site plan and modification to the landscaping standard with the condition that all remaining staff requested changes to the plans are made as reflected in PZR 2018-10B. And that concludes my presentation. Be happy to open up for questions.
Any questions for Ben at this time? Commissioner Height?
Maybe I'm on. Planner Ortiz. Wow. I'm a little loud. The west building, you identified that the north end of that is where the commercial structure is going to be. And do we define mixed-use buildings as residential in one part and commercial in another, or is it all residential? Is it all commercial? It's interesting to me that, you know, it's just this particular section where the buffer setback has to be implemented. Is it only for the commercial section, or is it for the whole building?
Chairman Shernick, Commissioner Poland. So the landscape buffer on the west side is only, that 20-foot landscape buffer is only applicable to the commercial portion. So when we were looking at this project, we were basically looking at the allowed uses, and commercial office is a permitted use in the commercial zoning district. However, the residential component was regarded as conditional, and that's what kicked this up to Planning and Zoning Commission. But whatever uses are allowed to a degree within a particular zoning district, as in this case, so they chose to mix it up, provide residential and commercial, and that is perfectly okay, subject to your approval, because the residential portion is regarded as conditional.
So the building has two different components. It has a residential component and a commercial component. And it's the commercial component that we're focused on.
Correct, it has a residential and a commercial component, but we call it a mixed-use building.
Appreciate that. Also, you have identified that, I guess it's PCR 2018-10B, that there are some suggested revisions that staff has. Can you identify what those are?
Yes, a lot of them are still minor. Commissioner Shernick had pointed out one that I had missed, but they still have some drainage issues that they're working through with the Public Works Department. And they're aware of those, and Public Works is working with them to get those resolved.
And another issue I identified is that the west building is identified as the east building and vice versa, at least on the plans that I reviewed.
My apologies. Thank you.
Any further questions for Ben at this time? Commissioner Teta?
Ben, could you repeat what you said about the what necessitated the landscape change right before you got to the Excel part?
So Chairman Shernick, Commissioner Teta. So the applicant felt that the design of the building, in order to make it work, required the commercial component to be on the west side. And so that was their vision, and so they chose to proceed forward with that. The code requires different landscape buffer standards for commercial versus residential. And so for commercial adjacent to residential, it requires a 20-foot landscape buffer. And then the actual landscaping that's required is 1 tree, 5 shrubs per, I believe, 500 square feet. So in this case, they've chosen to shrink that up because their project simply wouldn't have worked the way they'd penciled it out if that 20-foot landscape buffer was required. Now, because they're seeking a modification based on the infill redevelopment standard, then the stricter application of the code, as you might see with variances, isn't applicable in this case.
Does the applicant have a presentation?
Yes.
Okay, let's go to that, please.
Am I on, guys? Oh, wow. Hi, I'm Alex Gore of F9 Productions. My business partner there is Lance. I won't go into much detail at all. I'll be very brief about our past, but we started our firm here in Longmont because we got laid off during the recession and no architecture firms were hiring. And we worked at good firms. Daniel Liebskin, World Trade Center guy, he worked for award-winning architects here, and there was just nothing. So this is actually a dream come true for us to be this far from 2008 to here. So we're excited. We do cool work. That's what those were. There we go. Now onto this project. So Ben kind of set us up where we're at. This is a newer picture with the other Chrisman apartments. This is one in color of what it looks like, and we'll talk on the landscape buffer and show you kind of what we're doing and why we're doing it. Some of the exterior materials, we're going for a more modern look. So we're going to use stucco on the outside and then a nice hardy board and nice black windows. We think that will look nice. And then a board and batten for the commercial, and then some stone to kind of soften it up. And we think that will also work nice. So here's a site plan. The floor plans probably don't matter for this meeting. This is my first time doing this. If you want me to talk about floor plans, I can tell you floor plans if you want to live here. I'm getting head shakes no, so I won't go into the floor plans. But one of the cool things that I think is kind of warranted in this project is that we will have a rooftop deck, and we think it'll be a great place for everyone. We designed this if we're going to live here, not to kind of just do things weird, but to make sure that we brought it up to the standard that we wanted. So we'll have solar panels on there. You can grow. This is a very diverse community. Lance is in growing gardens, so you can grow up there. And then gas-only fire, so that it doesn't get out of control, so that you can have a nice evening up. And Longmont is such a beautiful place, and the mountains are such a beautiful place, so we wanted to take advantage of that. So there's the exterior. Now, the review criteria of why we're here. So the first two are, we're consistent with basically all the codes and everything besides these two things that we're kind of talking about. Same with the design standards, which is B. And then number C, I think, is the key, is that we're consistent with the intent and purpose of the zoning. And the future code, the timing, the way the future code works out, I think backs us up a little bit. So as you can see, the scale of what we're putting there is not really overpowering anything. They're actually, compared to the neighbors, it's a small site, so we need to fit in there. And if we look, so this is a commercial area, and one of the reasons why I think it's been vacant for a long time is not only because it's on a side road, but the width is actually half the width of most of all the other commercial areas. So to make any sort, I don't even know what you'd put there. Hardee's, probably not. An office space, you'd probably just have a whole bunch of parking in the front because you can't really get around it, especially with the buffers. If you had a 20-foot buffer, it's a difficult site. So to make this work, we combine commercial and residential. So this is a picture of our lot. This is where the buildings would sit. And talking about the landscape buffer. So our building, if you are looking at that screen, is on the right with the commercial. And what we're separating is the residents on the right with ours. We understand the purpose of a landscape buffer, especially if you're putting some sort of office building or something like that, you'd want some sort of buffer. And what we did to kind of mitigate that is that we brought the scale down. It's not a huge commercial structure there. It matches with the size of the residences, and it doesn't really overpower it. The second thing we did is that, and this actually came from the review process, they have a landscape architect that's reviewing it. And he said, why don't you put a bunch of juniper trees there so that they would shoot up, and we actually thought it was a really good idea because I'll show you a picture in a little bit. I think it's gonna make for a cool look. So basically what we are required to do is 1 tree and 5 shrubs in this area. And instead what we did is we put 6 trees in there, but it's smaller. Now, if we talk about the code, basically in my interpretation, and trust me, my interpretation is not always right, when you have a buffer, so on our the right side of the page, there's a 10-foot buffer on there, and that's coming from the parking lot on an adjacent property because we're an infill site. So because they already built, we have to put a buffer on our property. Now, buffers can be, you have to have landscape in there, but obviously you could cross roads in there and pedestrians, that's allowed. So buffers may be interrupted by necessary pedestrians and vehicle access. So the only thing between us and that other building and on our site is vehicle access. So in my interpretation, we have the 20 feet because we have vehicle access, and then we have 7 feet on our sides. And even in where our sidewalk is, we made that permeable pavers, so it's max more water can drip in there and all that. And then we exceeded the amount of trees in there. So we exceeded the amount of trees. I still think we have the required width because that buffer exists. And then we're complying with the spirit and the intent. Now, this is sort of a tricky situation, and I think that's why the new codes came out. So the new codes, let's go through that. Here's a picture of what it's like without vegetation. And then here's what we're gonna do. So in front of the building, actually I can point on this, right, Ben? There we go. So, oops, I can draw. Highlighter. This 1 tree and 5 shrubs is normally what's required over here. But we actually think, can I undo that? That looks bad, eraser. We actually think it looks better it looks better with these 6 skyrocketing junipers. You have a nice, walking through the space, you know, I'm an architect, walking through the space, it would feel really nice. I think it would look even better from their property and just enhance the neighborhood, actually. So in the future, it's going to be MUC, mixed use corridor. So I know you can't see, but we're up there in the purple. That's where we are. And basically what they want in their envision of what they're going forward is mixed use, right? And that's what we're doing is mixed use. So residential and professional office. And that's just a definition of mixed use, but it's essentially what we're doing. And then here's the permitted for the office and the residential. And then let's talk, what are the buffers going to be in the future? Because if we comply with that too, we're moving within where Longmont wants to be. So in that area, the buffer is the setback. So the buffer would be, the future buffer would be 5 feet. We have 7 feet, 5 feet is fine. And then, because that's what that's saying, that A is matching it. And then an alternative landscape design shall be submitted if the buffer precludes tree plantings. So it's again giving that flexibility, and thus the flexibility that Ben talked about with the codes, that there is these modification for infill sites, because not everything's perfect in an infill site. You got to work with whatever's around you and the width and what you got. And then the city response is that it's proportionate with the scope of the project and increase qualities of landscaping. And then we also, Ben already mentioned the numbers, but we put a lot of trees and vegetation here just because it's going to look really good. Then the other review criteria is it does not significantly adverse the surrounding properties. I don't think it does. I think it enhances it, especially because it's just a lot right now. And then the draining is the other issue too. So right back, oh man, what did I do, Ben? Okay. Right back here is where a lot of our water flows, this way, normally without any of the buildings going there. And the problem is that down this way, everything kind of pools up, and it's not a great place. So we had our engineers redesign it so that less than what is historical actually drains this way, and the majority of everything goes out this way. So we're trying to improve it because we don't want bad neighbors, and we feel like it'd be terrible to add more water than what's already happening. And the engineers met with the city staff, and we have the new drawings. So Ben is going to say, do this and make sure it doesn't happen, and we've done it. And then they'll review it and say yes or no. But since they had the meeting, I'm pretty sure it's going to work out. And that's it. That's all I have. So I'll take any questions, and then we ask that you guys approve it unanimously. I can't even talk. Unanimously. You know what I'm saying. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Gore.
Yeah.
Commissioner Flagg.
Write that down 4 times wrong.
My question is in regards to the structures on the roof.
Yes.
So you have the structures on the roof, and I assume that at some point people are going to want to be in those structures. How will those lights, will you have lighting up there? I'm assuming they're going to need lighting up there. So my concern is that the light that they would need there on their private space would not intrude on adjacent properties by being either too bright or misdirected, and how will you manage that not to happen?
That's a great question, and I think we'll have to write it into our HOA and maybe even provide downlightings, and so that, and thus saying you cannot add more light. If we provide no light, then what you're saying, we're just going to be chasing them all the time. Take down your lights, take down your lights. If we provide some light and make sure that it's the right light that doesn't spill over, then the rule is you just can't have additional lights out there. I think that's the way we'd solve it.
Additionally, go ahead.
Chairman Chernick, Commissioner Flagg. So when I reviewed their photometric lighting plan, and I actually had them add notes to their lighting plan, which is fairly typical for my reviews, but one of them requires that all light fixtures be full cutoff. So the bulb is up underneath the shield, and so the lighting will have to come straight down. And then we also require that the lighting levels don't exceed a certain foot candles. And for residential, I believe that's 1 foot candle. So it's about half of what you'd normally find for commercial. So when we do our inspections, we'll be looking at that lighting and making sure that it is compliant with the city's codes.
And I have just one more question. Does the height of those structures, how does that relate to the total height allowed in that zoning?
Chairman Shernick, Commissioner Flagg. So the height of the top of those structures does not meet within the commercial zoning district, they're allowed to go up to 45 feet, and the height of those particular structures are at about 40 to the top of those shade structures.
Thank you.
Commissioner Goldberg.
Hi, Mr. Gore. Thanks for being here today. I missed about the first half of your deck because you were going really fast. Would you just for a moment go back to the beginning of your deck, including the other work that you do or you've done, just so I could see it, but at a slightly slower pace? All the way to the first one.
Of our work or of the new project?
Including the first couple of slides that included some of your other work that you've done. And then maybe just, a little slower than that.
Okay, so I'll be a little bit slower. This was our first project, and this was a foundation that was left over from the recession. And it was the houses next to it were absolutely terrible. And our first project as a firm was building off of the bones of the recession. And we think we did an okay job with it. This isn't golden. And then this is a similar project that we've done in Lakewood, and this is similar interiors to it. But again, we call it Mark II because everything we've done before, we're trying to improve on it. So like a Canon, first Canon camera is Mark I, the next one is Mark II. And it's so fundamental, even some of the small stuff where we aren't varying the foundation, but we're varying the exterior facade. All the construction knowledge, this is really a 10 years worth of work combined to make this. We made a tiny house, it was on HGTV, and they came and filmed Longmont, and we rethought if you guys are familiar with tiny houses, they look like cabins, but those don't drag down the road nice. So why not make it so that it's orientated towards that, so wind goes over it, add solar panels, you'll see a theme here, add big windows let in light, add it, and then protect that with a fold-up deck and a fold-down awning. It protects it when it goes, but it's fun when it's out. And then here's the interior. And then we did one, we can't mention this company, but a big Fortune 500 company said, hey, could you do that but on steroids? So please make the deck all the way big and fold up and the top all the way, the whole length fold down. And then please make a sky deck and please make that on hydraulics and then please make the railings fold in so we can pull it. So that one was absolutely nuts. I just had a baby during that one, so my wife was not pleased.
Well, hold on, go back. Go at the same pace, even through these ones. Thanks.
Yep, and then here's the new site.
Mm-hmm.
This is what it's gonna look like, essentially. And then we're using some good materials. So this is Lance's house in Longmont. So the best contractors that we found from his house we wanna use again because they're local and we know which ones were good and which ones were bad. For stucco, this is honestly amazing stucco work. The precision in detail is awesome. And I think they were just in our office this morning. And then here's some of the exterior sidings. Again, that stone is just a nice entrance. Again, with the board and batten, so it's kind of like a country modern feel. But that's no longer new. That's happening. And then the floor plans, which we think also are very cool, because you could shut this off and have it when your parents come, you could have them in there because it has a bathroom. There, but it could also be your dining room, so it's kind of dual use. Again, using space smartly. And then 2 bedrooms upstairs for each one. And then there's obviously amazing views. But you need to be shaded because it is hot. It is really, today, it was really hot. So we're going to shade them with solar panels, two birds with one stone. And the solar panels have to be below the utility rate, the power rating, or else we can't do it. And then obviously gardening is super fun. I don't know how else to say that. We have a gas line going up there too, because we think it would be awesome. That's why, and we think we can do it. And then here's your view. And then hopefully right here would be your tomato garden, and maybe you'd have some pots with some more, and then you'd be sitting here high-fiving your neighbor. And in that first project that we showed that we did in Lakewood, they said that the rooftop community is huge because everyone can like talk to each other. Because it's not traditional suburban houses, which I live in, which are totally fine. You know, you're in your backyard. The fences we didn't have fences when I was kids, but apparently there's fences now, and I don't like it, and I want to tear it down. My wife says no, but so everyone, they just say it's like just hanging out, and people are really getting to know each other. So yeah, those were the views.
Thank you. That was really helpful.
Commissioner Height.
Thank you. Mr. Gore, one of the things we need to look at is what type of regional steps you've considered in your design. And somebody spoke earlier, your commercial structure's on the west side of the property, and this is what's causing you the little bit of the modification issue. Did you consider putting it on the east side? And if you did, why don't you? Maybe
That's on. We did consider putting it on that side, and there's a couple of reasons why we didn't. One, if we look at the bigger picture and we kind of zoom out, right here is this open space. And if good urban design, we connect it with our portion of more open space by having the smaller building here and the larger building on that side. Secondly, if I go back to a site plan, let's go. This one's fine. If I want to zoom in to a site plan. So if we flipped it again, what would happen is because on this side, there's this 10-foot buffer from that person's property that we have to abide in. That means that the best selling units and the best entrance to it wouldn't have that same space. It wouldn't have that same buffer because it'd have to be extremely close to this side. So then it wouldn't even have to have a buffer. So it would just be front lawns looking into a parking lot instead of a nice landscape area. So again, if we have to do it, let's utilize that space since we have to do it anyways on that side. And then the third reason, which I also think is a big reason, is that if you flip it, there's more rooftop and there's more building on this side. And if it goes over here, that means more water goes to this person's property. And we don't want to do that either. So those are the three main reasons.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Commissioner Teta.
Mr. Gore, you said professional office. Is that what you envision in the commercial space?
Yes, we do. It could be in the first level, maybe a high-tech, low-noise tinker mill in the sense of we're not using chop saws. We're trying to make 3D printers and cool things like that for the future.
Okay, this is a public hearing item, and so we're going to, thank you, Mr. Gore.
Okay, thank you.
We'll get back to more Q&A. Going to open up the public hearing portion of the meeting. Nobody has signed up, but if anybody is in the audience who would like to come forward and speak about this project, we'd love to have you come forward at this time. Seeing nobody coming forward, we will close the public hearing and go back to discussion amongst the commission and questions and answers, et cetera. Any thoughts, ideas, comments? Nobody's jumping forward. Oh, Commissioner Goldberg. All right.
Well, I think I'll just cut to the chase. I think this is a really neat project for our town, and I think it's an innovative use on an infill project. I like a lot of the aspects that Mr. Gore has brought. I like the kind of smaller, the creative use of a small space. I like that it's fitting our intentions of having a mixed-use corridor. I like that it's bringing kind of an innovative style to the north part of town. And I just am having trouble finding too many reasons to not support this. I'll just keep going. I appreciate, sometimes we have folks who are looking to get a variance, and maybe they don't bring much to the table, and it's clear that Mr. Gore has brought an abundance of shrubs and trees well above the requirement, and I think they've done everything they could to kind of meet the intention. So I think that's genuinely appreciated. When I look at our review criteria, the project is consistent with the comp plan. The project has an appropriate transportation plan. The project is in the right zone, meeting the intention of the zone, without impacting the neighbors. And pedestrian transportation is not a problem either. So I look forward to, and we didn't hear any negative feedback from utilities and other stakeholders in our town. So I look forward to hearing the feedback from the rest of the commission, but unless I hear something compelling, I'll be supporting the project.
Commissioner Height.
I laud F9 for being able to find financing to build condominiums. Congrats to you, because no one's been building that product lately because they can't find financing. I find that the review criterion for this infill modification under 1501-040B has been met as aptly identified by Mr. Gore in terms of the considerations that went into his design. Excuse me. I got to quit eating almonds while I'm sitting here. The drainage impact, the site plan tying into the open space across the street made sense to me and indicated that there is thoughtful design work going on here. Thanks.
I'll chime in myself. I think it's a really well thought out plan. This is the kind of thing that I would like to see more of in town. It's good architecture, it's good planning, it's good urban use, it's good infill. It's neighborly. They've worked with everybody around them. The fact that they're going to completely redo the drainage in order to alleviate a drainage problem for the entire neighborhood, or not alleviate, but minimize it. It really is very, very thoughtful, and I also appreciate that they are local and they're going to use local contractors, and that it's a condo, which we don't have enough of. So I will just go ahead and move things forward by putting out a motion to approve PZR 2018-10B, which is the version that allows for staff to still get those remaining changes to the drainage done. Commissioner Flake.
I would second that motion.
Okay, motion to approve PZR 2018-10B has been seconded by Commissioner Flake. Any further discussion, comments? Seeing none, let's take a vote. Okay, that passes unanimously 7-0. And this item now enters a 7-day appeal period. During this time, any aggrieved party may appeal the Commission's decision by submitting a written appeal letter stating why the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision should be amended or reversed by City Council. All appeals must be in writing and must be received in the City Clerk's office and the Planning Office within the 7-day appeal period, which begins Thursday, June 28 at 8 a.m. and ends Thursday, July 5 at 5 p.m. One day later, due to the July 4th holiday. Thank you, Jane, for that note. And thank you to Mr. Gore and his partner for your presentation. Really appreciate it. Hope to see you here again. Ben, thank you for that presentation. We'll give you a little bit of time to set up the next item. And let me go back to my agenda. And that next item is Modern West Annexation Zoning and Concept Plan PZR 2018-9 with planner Ben Ortiz.
Chairman Shernick, members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, this project for your consideration is the Modern West Annexation Zoning and Concept Plan. The Boulder County Assessor designates this property as agricultural. It is currently vacant land and is 15.78 acres in size. The zoning of the surrounding properties is as follows. Oops, sorry, let's try to get the pointer. So the properties to the north are business light industrial. The south are down here. We have residential plan unit development, and then underneath these portions here, it is unincorporated Boulder County. Off to the east is industrial plan unit development with a special use overlay, and then off to the west is also business light industrial. The property is within the airport influence zone. The envisioned Longmont land use designation for this property is mixed use employment. Nelson Road down here is an existing principal arterial. And then a future collector road on the north side of the property is shown on the envisioned Longmont plan. And it will come in off of Rogers Road here. The applicant is requesting business light industrial zoning, which is consistent with the mixed use employment envisioned Longmont land use, and the proposed future zoning is also going to be mixed use employment. The concept plan shows a light industrial park for manufacturing, warehousing, and office support space to be constructed in 3 phases with a new local road on the west side of the development. Light industrial is consistent with the future mixed use employment. So a traffic study did conclude that the Modern West would generate a little under 800 trips per day. Based on that traffic study finding, the proposed collector will need to be constructed from Rogers to Anderson, and that any portion of the collector not constructed by the time Modern West develops would be required to be constructed with the Modern West development. So the Ecological Resources Survey identified that there were no threatened or endangered species or obvious habitat were seen on the site for endangered species or threatened species. There were no wetlands or waters of the U.S. subject to Section 404 of the Clean Water Act, and there were no prairie dogs observed on or adjacent to the property. So we sent referral packets to a number of different agencies, including CenturyLink, Excel, Energy, the Airport Advisory Board, City of Longmont, the Airport Manager, Federal Aviation Administration, Boulder County Land Use and Open Space Department, Boulder County Transportation Department, Mountain View Fire District, Longmont Economic Development Partnership, Longmont Chamber of Commerce, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Service. And the city received responses from the agencies listed on your screen. The Airport Advisory Board chairman noted that the proposed annexation is on a direct approach to a runway and could hinder airport use if not developed properly. He believes the proposed use to be an approved use within an airport influence zone and believes that the FAA would not object to the proposed development. The board chairman suggested he would not object to the proposed development with the caveat that the building heights not infringe on the floor of the approach of the departure paths to Vance Brand's runway, and that careful attention should be paid to the landscape trees and their projected full growth height. David Slater, the airport manager, made similar comments and felt the annexation proposal meets the FAA's intent of compatible land use. He stated that while it doesn't appear that there would be an issue with height, it would appear that the FAA will require an airspace analysis to make that determination. He noted that conditional approval should be based on FAA determination and that no structure or object of natural growth will penetrate the FAR Part 77 imaginary surface or approach departure procedure. The Longmont Economic Development Partnership sent a letter subsequent to the publishing of the communication in support of the Modern West annexation. They state that vacancies as they exist today don't meet the needs of many new and expanding companies seeking smaller spaces with higher ceilings similar to what is being proposed by Modern West. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service responded with a no comment to the proposed annexation. Xcel Energy had no objections but requested that they be notified after the annexation is approved. Lastly, the Peck Ditch Company wasn't originally contacted by the city. The alignment for this ditch doesn't show up on our GIS mapping systems proximate to the property. So we actually didn't know of its existence until we heard from the Peck Ditch Company just within the past day. We received a letter from them, which hopefully you have now. The Peck Ditch Company requests that there be a provision to protect the middle lateral of the Peck Ditch to ensure that the shareholders will be able to obtain irrigation water. The city will preserve the ditch owner's interest by formalizing any necessary easements at the time of platting. Also, annexing doesn't preclude the shareholder from accessing the water they're entitled to. So we received 2 telephone inquiries from surrounding property owners subsequent to the mailing of the notice of application. Neither expressed opposition or support for the project, but simply asked about project specifics. City also received a written inquiry from a nearby resident seeking clarification on the proposed application as well as some additional information. At the neighborhood meeting, there were 2 residents that attended, and they were primarily interested in the project schedule moving forward. The city received an email from the owners at 8701 Nelson Road requesting additional information about the concept plan and timeline for construction. They were under the impression that when the land was purchased, the land would remain as pasture land. They've now become aware that there's a concept plan for industrial buildings associated with the annexation. And they state that the Modern West owners have made no attempts to contact them about future plans for the Modern West property. The shaded portions of the annexation map show where the proposed annexation is contiguous with other city-owned parcels. And let me show you. So there would be this portion here and this portion down here. And state law does require that at least 1/6 of the property to be annexed to be contiguous with city property. And so as you can see by this map, they've met their contiguity requirement. And then the concept plan shows the proposed collector on the north side of the property and a proposed local road on the west side of the property here, which would connect the collector to Nelson Road. Access to the property would be off of the future east-west collector and the north-south local road on the west side of the development. And those access points are indicated here with these little red arrows. The concept plan shows that development would occur in 3 phases. And phase 1 is up here on the north. Phase 2 is this larger middle parcel, and then phase 3 is this smaller parcel on the lower southwest corner of the site. Bike and pedestrian connectivity is shown connecting the 3 proposed phases. They're here. Actually, let me get this right here and then across the bottom of the property. Required landscape buffers are shown around the perimeter of the site as required per City of Longmont landscape standards. They're reflected in this green around the perimeter. And the plan notes are added stating the property is subject to the annexation agreement and that all future development of the property must conform to the approved concept plan unless amended by City Council. So the Planning and Zoning Commission is the recommending body on this application. City Council will be the decision-making body. Planning and Zoning Commission options are as follows. Recommend approval of the Modern West Annexation Zoning and Concept Plan without conditions, finding that the applicable review criteria have been met as reflected in PZR 2018-9A. Recommend approval of the Modern West Annexation Zoning and Concept Plan with conditions, finding that the applicable review criteria have generally been met but require conditions of approval to fully comply with the criteria, or recommend denial of the Modern West Annexation Zoning and Concept Plan, finding that the common review criteria for all major and minor development applications and/or review criteria for annexations have not been met. Staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the Modern West annexation with the following conditions. 1, any remaining staff-related changes to the plans are made. By and large, those are complete. Just in case we've missed anything, I stuck that in there. And the second is the applicant shall be responsible for the construction of any portion of the east-west collector street that has not been constructed at the time of the Modern West development. And that concludes my presentation. And the applicant is also here and is willing to make a presentation as also, or is prepared to, I should say.
Great. Thank you, Ben. Commissioner Height?
I have a matter to disclose. That one of the property owners in the southeast corner of the adjacent property, Alicia All's house, works for Boulder County, and in my other professional work as an attorney, have had occasion to represent a client with interest adverse to Boulder County, and specifically those taken by Ms. All's house. I don't believe that my work with Boulder County or with Ms. All's house influences my decision-making here today. I also don't know what Ms. All's house position is with respect to this project. And again, I don't believe I'm conflicted, but do need to make that disclosure.
Thank you, Commissioner Height. Appreciate that. Commissioner Check?
Hey, Ben. You mentioned the collector road on the north had to be completed before any development had to go, but my question is about the local road on the side. Is that tied to, does that need to be completed before phase 2 or 3 goes into place, or is there any time restrictions on that?
Our Public Works engineering staff are deliberating, I think. Hang on.
Chairman Shermack and members of the commission, Chris Huffer with Public Works and Natural Resources. Staff has been working with this application for some time now, as well as the other annexations in that area that include that east-west collector. But the road that you're specifically referring to is local, and it will have to be looked at also in conjunction with the annexation and development of that property to the south and west. It may be required, but it will be dependent upon the traffic study and how that parcel develops out.
Thank you.
Commissioner Teta?
Chris, I had a quick question for you too. What's the timeline on Fordham going through from Nelson to Rogers?
Commissioner Teta and Chairman Shermack. Fordham is part of the HMS annexation, which is going through the process at this point in time. They have not given us a clear understanding of how soon that will happen, and so it'll all be dependent upon their development schedule. The surrounding property is all within that HMS annexation for Fordham itself. If there were a traffic study that came in that said that that connection was needed, then another development would have to build that ahead of HMS. But that's not anticipated at this point in time.
And I have a question for you. In terms of the conditions on PZR 2018-9B, what's in our packet currently just has one item on it: applicant make all staff requested changes to the plans. So we would need to add the second thing, which you mentioned, which was the building of the road. But I'm wondering if the first item about making staff requested changes would cover us in terms of some of the comments and concerns coming from the airport manager.
Chairman Chernak, I'm not exactly sure. I think generally to cover our bases, it may be best to have some specificity to the actual conditions, so that there is no questions. I mean, generally that first condition is if there were any minor additions to the plans that still need correcting, or in the case of the last one we looked at, we know that they have some drainage related issues that still require fixing. I don't know, I've never actually encountered that question before. I apologize.
Thanks, Ben. I guess we'll get into that more after we hear from the applicant and get further along. But Commissioner Flake? Okay, you'll wait. So let's go ahead with the applicant's presentation, please.
Hi, I'm Barb Brunk, landscape architect with Resource Conservation Partners, P.O. Box 1522, Longmont, Colorado. With me this evening are the applicant, Derek Garagio, Modern West, our engineer, Todd Borger, and another, our energy conservation kind of expert, Scott Simkus. So we're all here to answer your questions as we move forward. I have a little bit of duplication on Ben's stuff, but I'll try not to do much. Generally, you know where we're located. We are looking for an annexation and concept plan. This applicant's vision is for a vibrant, light industrial park with a variety of buildings containing manufacturing, warehousing, and office support space, which is consistent with the BLI zoning and will be consistent with the mixed-use employment zoning as the new code is adopted. Again, this is where we are in the world. This is Anderson. This is the Williams annexation. We had a conversation about the firehouse storage on this site here. This is Macy's, and these are those two Boulder County agriculture pieces to the left. And Ben said the land is vacant. It's pasture grass, so it's be careful about calling it vacant land. It's farmland at this point. And that Peck ditch runs along this edge here. Airport here, and I have you can see the airport advisory on the zoning map. Again, existing zoning around us. This is all BLI. This is Anderson. So we're consistent with that zoning as we move forward. Here's unincorporated Boulder County. We are consistent with the comp plan, and this is the map that shows that. This is a property in mixed-use employment, and specifically these uses that were contemplated are set forth in the mixed-use employment overlay. Again, we meet the contiguity requirement of 1/6 for the annexation. We're pretty much an enclave when you look at that part of town, so it makes sense for this to be incorporated into the city and develop inside the city limits. Our annexation, our concept plan, this says 60, it should say 80 to add up to 100%. 60% is light industrial, 20% will be open space. This is that road that's going to connect up to Rogers and someday across to Hover Road. So that's the collector, and this is that local street. And that ditch runs along this edge of the property. Everybody understands that the ditch company needs to continue to operate, and we have to work with them through the process. And the adjacent neighbors, I don't know why they think they haven't been contacted, but we did send notice as required as part of the process. And the only people who came to the neighborhood meeting were the people who own the firehouse storage property. So we did reach out to them. We can reach out to them individually as we move forward through preliminary plat. Review criteria. We are consistent with the LACP Envision Longmont. The property is designated mixed-use employment and will be developed in compliance with all applicable codes and standards. There are a few other Envision Longmont goals that this property furthers. Growth management says grow within the municipal service area. We will, as soon as we're annexed, we'll be within the municipal service area and within the 3 miles. Basically, utilities are at or near the site, and the existing transportation infrastructure is at or near the site. The development types plan for a combination. This is undeveloped property, but it really is, if you look at the neighborhood out there, kind of infill. I mean, when you think about it that way, it'll fill a need for flexible space. You saw the letter from Longmont Economic Development Council that high-ceilinged, smaller space that has flexibility is lacking. And this applicant has that vision for interesting architecture and a mix of uses that we're really excited to bring forward to you if we get through the annexation process, that preliminary plat with a little more detail. Our architect, Erin Bagnell from Sophus Barn, was unable to be here this evening, but when we're here talking about the architecture, she'll be here to talk with you. We will provide the right-of-way for future connections, both that collector along the north side and the north-south. We have some pretty consistent integrated connectivity in the neighborhood. Again, Nelson Road, there's transit at Nelson and Airport. When we put this connection in, it gets us up to Rogers, which gets us into Likens Gulch, which gets us into the city's greenway system. There are off-site bike trails, both on Airport and Nelson, and there'll be internal pedestrian connections on the site. So I think we really will fill a little piece of the overall neighborhood as this develops in the future. The airport. I learned a lot about the airport the last time we were here and having a conversation. And the city code is very, very specific about what can and cannot be built in that approach zone. So condition is okay, but the code is very clear. And so as we move forward through the process, the code will rule and require us to make sure that we are consistent and not penetrating that surface. We're a long way from the airport, so I don't think it's going to be an issue, but we'll actually do the analysis at the time we do our preliminary plat and we have our buildings designed, so we'll be able to tell you that specifically. The applicant will give water supply, the historic use is a peck on the ditch. That'll come to the city and they'll make up any difference when they do the final plat. There's a goal about workspaces, and this is that kind of deal where we have overhead doors in the back, office space in the front, an opportunity to have manufacturing or warehousing or some combination thereof. So we have that, fill that niche that is missing in our system right now. Application complies with the design standards. Again, we're at the very beginning. We don't see any exceptions required to develop this property. We have the required space to do what we need to do, and we'll be back with a preliminary plat that meets those standards, and we can serve with utilities without issue. We're consistent with the intent of the zone. It's BLI, and this is BLI written all over it, and mixed-use employment written all over it. It's manufacturing, warehousing, light industrial, office support space is what the BLI zone was set up to do, and this project envisions that moving forward. So I think we're consistent with the intent of the zone. We don't anticipate any adverse impacts on the surrounding properties. The only place we have a little attention, I think, to detail will be this, along this side. The houses for these sites are pretty close to Nelson Road, but there will be a landscape buffer here. And so the rest of this area is also BLI, so they fit together. It's not like it's a use that's out of pocket for those things. We meet the criteria for annexation under the Municipal Act, contiguity, and the community of interest. All those things, statutory things, are met for this application. Again, we talked about the LACP and the municipal service area. The zoning is appropriate based on the comp plan and the mixed-use employment zone. The BLI is actually talked about in the Envision Longmont as part of that case. I think we're going to actually help integrate the surrounding properties into the neighborhood by building those streets. So we'll be piece of that transportation network so we don't limit integration in the future. We have no vested rights that are associated with the property, so there's no issue with that. And as Ben said, we had a phase 1 environmental assessment, no issues were identified. We had a habitat conservation plan, no environmental resources identified on the site. So I think we're consistent with those things. Concept plan criteria, same thing. You know, it's about, are the uses appropriate for utilities, transportation? So again, streets, there's a sewer line here. We'll have to, you know, the applicant will have to build water lines and all other infrastructure required, meet the standard for drainage and all those things. Again, we're pretty much at the front end of the system, so We'll give more detail as we move forward. And we have not identified any adverse impacts to the environment. We'll meet the drainage, water quality standards, and all of those things that go through the process. This applicant is also looking into energy conservation measures that can be integrated into the process. And as we get a little more further, if you choose to let us annex, as we get a little more along in the process, that'll come back in the next phase of the development. We're here to answer your questions and ask for your recommendation for approval. That's my 10 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brunk. Any questions for Ms. Brunk at this time? I don't see any. This is a public hearing item, so we'll open up the public hearing. Nobody has signed up to speak about this, but if there's somebody in the audience who'd like to come forward and tell us what you think, we'd love to hear it. Seeing nobody stepping forward, we'll close the public hearing. We'll go back to comments and questions from the commission. Commissioner Poland.
Ben, in looking at this, the concept plan is rather simple, just breaking down that they're going to do BLI in 3 different phases. For an annexation, is that kind of more or less what you usually just see?
Chairman Chernick, Commissioner Poland. Concept plans vary pretty significantly. Some of them are extremely detailed, and some of them are very light on details. And so it's not unusual to see something that is basic. And I think the reason for doing that is it gives them a little more flexibility when it comes time to actually designing their project, whereas if they were to have a very, very detailed concept plan, then they would be tied to that. So you see that happen, different approaches for how plans are done. And this is not terribly unusual.
And then also, we will get another crack at this with the preliminary plat when it, if this does go forward. Will that come back to this commission?
Chairman Chernick, Commissioner Poland, for a plat with 3 lots, Joni, we would require. So more than 3 would require preliminary plat. And as to whether the commission, well, I'm sort of sketchy on the new land development code in terms of the site plan. Would it be required to go before Planning and Zoning Commission? I think the answer is no, unless there are some variances. And I don't believe if it's generally a subdivision plat of 3 or fewer lots is a minor subdivision. So I don't believe you'd see it again.
Commissioner Height.
Ms. Brunk, maybe you moved away too quick, or possibly somebody from the ownership team. What's going on with parcel 2? What is that?
Good question. We left it as a simple piece of property. It will either have some kind of pedestrian connection or something like that associated with the development, or get sold to one of those neighbors as part of their parcel. We had anticipated having access through that site, but it doesn't work with Envision Longmont. So it's kind of a remnant kind of a piece. So, but it could make a great pedestrian connection. We'll kind of figure that out as we finish our site plan up, but it could also go to one of those landowners to the south in order to keep people from running through the middle of their property as they move forward. I mean, I think that someday that property will develop. It's inside the LACP. It's not going to be a house forever down there. So not sure how that's going to work.
Does it provide access now?
It provides access to the site, yes. It's the farm road. You know, it was some old Boulder County recorded exemption kind of process where that was their frontage when they subdivided out this property. So it's a remnant of the county process.
Commissioner Goldberg.
Hey, Ben. Ben, we got an email from a neighbor that's in their writing. They said there has been no contact with us by the owners about the plan. Would you just clarify what is the expectation for notifying the neighbors, and is it typical for owners to reach out directly to landowners and, just help me feel confident that the proper noticing occurred.
Chairman Chernak, Commissioner Goldberg. So what would be typical for this project is that because there's a public hearing associated with it, then a neighborhood meeting is required prior to them submitting a development application. So in this case, notices were sent out to all property owners within 1,000 feet of the perimeter of this property, and the property was posted with a neighborhood meeting sign with specific information detailing the date, time, location of the neighborhood meeting, as well as who to contact with city staff. The same is true for when the applicant submits their development application. A new sign goes up stating development application under review. New notices are sent out to property owners within 1,000 feet. And then, of course, for the public hearing, it's the same. As to whether property owners are required to reach out, they're not required to reach out. Some do. You may recall the Chrisman Apartments to the north. They reached out to the property owners to the west multiple times to go over their design in order to get them to a comfort level that they could support the project. Not all developers do that. I think when they feel that there's a great deal of potential backlash, if they're smart, they would. But in a project like this, I don't know that it's typical, and it's certainly not required.
Ms. Brunk?
Add, this is the very beginning of this process. We don't have a design yet. I mean, we've been thinking about the design, but until we have something to show somebody besides the immediate neighbors, besides what you're looking at, which is a bubble diagram to give the most flexibility going forward, it's a little early outside the neighborhood meeting notice. I mean, we paper them with notice. So with our phone numbers and our emails and all those things. So if anybody wanted any information, we are absolutely available. As we move forward and we have more information, we would be happy to talk to the neighbors. But at this point, we're trying to give the most flexibility in a mixed-use employment as we move forward, and that's why you see a simple bubble diagram.
Thank you, Ms. Brunk. Would you just help me, Ben, I'm sorry,
Okay.
Back to Ben. In the email, they say that they saw there was a request for annexation and did not attend because they thought it was simply that, but now they're surprised that there's industrial buildings proposed. How can you comfort the same neighbor about that?
Chairman Chernak, Commissioner Goldberg. Virtually every annexation requires a concept plan be submitted along with it. So it's not unusual. Without actually getting inside of them and seeing what they saw, they see, it's just annexation and that's it, and then put it into the wastebasket? I don't know. But as you know, that with every annexation, a concept plan is required, and so if that's information that they missed, I don't know if that's something I can really speak to.
Okay, thank you. I feel comforted knowing that the proper noticing steps were taken. So thank you. My next question is, what can you tell me about the middle lateral of the Peck Ditch?
Chairman Chernak, not much. As Barb had indicated, and based on the description from the gentleman from Peck Ditch, let me just pull this up. As I understand it, it comes down along the west side of the property, and then correct me if I'm wrong, Barb, but cuts across this direction, based on the description from the letter.
Yeah, it runs mostly, the lateral runs along the western property and then turns a little to the east and then serves other properties. Again, ditch companies, no question. They have a right, they have a vested right, we get it. And as we move forward in the next part of the process, we'll contact them directly and talk to their engineer, and Todd will work with them to figure out to make sure that they continue to get service. City code, pretty much a no-brainer from a land development point of view, that we have to let them keep their water.
Great. Thank you. I think that's what I was looking for, was just confirmation that we will protect the middle lateral and all appropriate access.
Commissioner Poland.
Ben, getting back to the ditch, is there anything in our regulations that requires them to keep the ditch, or is this something that maybe we should make a note of in the PZR if we approve it?
To my knowledge, there's not any requirements that requires them to keep the ditch. I don't know that are you familiar with?
I have another hat and represent many ditch companies, so I can tell you that we always get a referral from the city, and nobody moves forward until the ditch company gets with planning staff and says, we got it. So, like I said, when I have my other hat on, I'm representing the ditch company, and when someone's trying to develop over the top of it, we work with them to make sure that it works, it operates, and all those things. So it's a referral comment, and in my experience as a ditch company person, city staff has been vigilant about making sure that their concerns are satisfied. So I don't know if it's a code or a practice, but when I have that other hat on, it always works. So now that they know, they'll also be part of that referral process as we move forward. And I think Chris could probably speak to that too.
Chairman and Commissioners, Chris Huffer again with Public Works and Natural Resources. So the state law covers water rights issues and covers the ditch companies as well. They have a prescriptive right to be there. And then also in the annexation agreement, the general language says that all irrigation ditch companies and laterals will be maintained, and that proper easements will be provided with the development of the property. So I'm not sure that I would recommend that there be any additional language at this point in time to cover those.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Anybody want to make a motion? Commissioner Goldberg.
Some of the commissioners are quiet today. Trying to give you a moment. Well then, I'm just going to jump to our review criteria and see if that doesn't lead us to a motion. What we are doing is recommending or considering the annexation, zoning, and concept plan for the project. The review criteria we have was covered by the applicant's packet, but I'll just touch on a few of the sections. The application needs to be consistent with Envision Longmont, and it appears to be. The proposed annexation and concept plan complies with the requirements in the land development code as well. The proposed road network is consistent with the Envision Longmont plan. BLI zoning is consistent with the zoning, with the surrounding zoning, that is. There are no threatened or endangered species on the site. Again, all backed up by documentation from experts. The concept plan shows the future collector and road access, which is consistent with the Envision Longmont plan. And then we jump into more specifics. It complies with the Municipal Annexation Act of 1965. It's contiguous with the annexing municipality, and the property is capable of being integrated with Longmont. Currently lies within the Longmont planning area. Uses that are allowed within BLI zoning are consistent with the mixed-use employment land use. Light industrial uses are currently regarded as permitted, and the proposed annexation should not impact adjacent developments. So I'll go for it. With that said, I'll just go ahead and recommend approval of the Modern West annexation under PZR 2018-9B which comes with 2 conditions: that all remaining staff requested changes to the plans are made, and that the applicant shall be responsible for the construction of any portion of the east-west collector street that has not been constructed at the time of development.
Commissioner Poland.
I also find that, based on the comments from both staff and from the applicant, that this does meet the common review criteria A, B, C, D, and E. I also find that it does also meet the review criteria standards for annexations A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And based on that, I'll go ahead and I will second.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve PZR 2018-9B with 2 conditions, and it's been seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, let's take a vote. Okay, that passes unanimously, 7-0. And this item will now be forwarded to the Longmont City Council for action. If you're unfamiliar with council procedures and intend to appear before council, please contact the Planning Division for further information at 303-651-8330. Thank you, Ms. Brunk, for your presentation and for your time. Thank you to the owners and the applicants. Ben, thank you very much for walking us through these 2 projects. We'll move on with the rest of our agenda. Next is a final call for the public invited to be heard. If there's anybody who'd like to come forward and speak. Seeing no one, we'll close the public invited to be heard. Any items from the commission? Seeing none, we'll close that. Items from Council Representative Aaron Rodriguez.
Just one, as always, thank you for your service, commissioners, and nice early meeting tonight.
Thank you very much. Items from Planning and Development Services Director Jenny Marsh.
Sorry. I was looking to see about meetings next month, so I don't see anything on the log just yet for either of the 2 meetings next month, so we'll keep you posted on that. I would say, if anything, assume only 1 meeting, not 2. So this was just one of those little anomalies where everything got backed up into the same month, so thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Unless anybody is opposed, we will adjourn. Thank you.